Bill Livingston and John Hollerick are two students who have been on the scene for the better part of the day. And perhaps we can get some more insight as to what has been going on as far as the fire goes.
Well, I was over at Glenn's getting ready to eat lunch, and I heard about the fire, so I ate lunch and decided to come over and see what was happening, and saw these guys here. They needed some help. The tree was in the way. They couldn't direct the hose into the building, so I got an axe and chopped down the tree along with John here. He helped me.
Well, Bill, now, have you physically been inside of the building?
I have not been inside the building at all. I walked around it, saw the parts that were gutted, and I talked to some of my friends that were here since way early this morning.
John, you've been here since about 8 o'clock this morning.
About 8:30.
About 8:30.
Yeah, one of my friends woke me up, and I'm a photographer, and I came up and took a bunch of pictures, and then they got a little short-handed. So I've been helping with the fire hose and watching the walls when the firemen are going in and out of the building, helping get the trees out of the way so I can get some water in.
You look a little tired, John. Have you been involved in all the smoke? At one time there was a lot of smoke. Were you working in there then?
Yes, sir. In and out.
Does it look like they can save any of the building?
Doesn't look like it to me, but I don't know that much about it, but it sure doesn't look like they can save a lot. They've thrown an awful lot of water on it.
And both of you are students.
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about the student's role in doing this sort of thing?
Well, I think it's fantastic. I came just as students started carrying out, and these kids were going in the smoke and fire and pulling out file cases and stuff out of the museum. And I've talked to a lot of firemen. They said without the students, they couldn't have saved anything. They couldn't even have manned the hoses. And the students, from what I've heard from President Morris, a few other people, that they've got everything out that was of any value.
John?
This kind of reminds you of the school spirit when the other old main burnt down. It was the same kind of student participation that helped save articles from the old main, too.
President Morris, I understand you saw some heroism during the height of the fire. Would you tell us what that was all about?
Well, as the fire was quite well along and the ceiling of the third floor had fallen onto the ceiling of the second, in the southwest corner, I watched while Captain Rodgers and 2 or 3 of his men went up a ladder to get some special records out of Professor Coe's office that that they had not brought out originally. They were overlooked because there were drawers and a little credenza there. At the time, it appeared the roof might fall on that room at any moment, but they did get in and did get the documents, which represent a great deal of the life, really, of Professor Coe, because there were manuscripts in production. And this, together with things like the man I saw standing on top of a snorkel with smoke so thick you could just see it billowing around him, and similar acts, both by the firemen and students, makes you appreciate the spirit that people put forth when they're faced with a crisis like this.
Is Mr. Rodgers the fire chief?
I believe so.
Mr. Basil Hedrick is the assistant director of the University Museum. Mr. Hedrick, are there any special things that right now you can't lay your hands on that you're almost certain that were lost in the fire?
The thing that is bothering us most at the moment is the whereabouts specifically of some artwork that was on loan to us by Professor and Mrs. Marshall, works that they had brought here from Russia. I do not know whether we were able to salvage those or not this morning.
What were some of the things that, other than that, that were possibly lost in there or you haven't found as yet at any rate?
At this juncture, we're afraid that we're missing some African collection materials of ours, although we got the vast bulk of it out. However, we were able to get the vast majority of the catalog. All the files are out. Dr. Kelly's books, which you can see in the background, the result of some 30 years' work on his part, have been saved. We're still attempting to save and hope to be able to get back in to save the remainder of Dr. Fraunfelter's books also. But we have no idea at this juncture how much has actually been lost. We know that we got the bulk of the materials out, particularly that which was on loan from other institutions or other individuals other than the Marshall stuff that I mentioned first.
Mr. Hedrick, is there any rough estimation of the total loss right now? And I realize that you can't assess it at all right now, but just a rough estimation.
It's in the museum alone. I have to say somewhere at least in the vicinity of $100,000 for the museum materials alone. And of course, I have no idea about the artworks that are missing. I don't even know their value at this moment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basil Hedrick. Dennis Jordan is a teaching assistant in the Department of History, and a lot of their books were housed in Old Main. Dennis, any idea of what you lost?
A great deal was lost. We just have a little pile out here, so not very much came out. Some professors got here early enough where they did get a few things out, Dr. Cherry and Dr. Dittweiler, but other than that, a lot of volumes were lost. A lot of manuscripts and notes, too, for works that the professors were working on.
Do you think that any of this can be recovered in any way?
I doubt it. A lot of TAs also. We got nothing out of our room, so a lot of theses, term papers, things like this are just lost, unless there's copies, which we don't know yet. We'll have to find out what's happened.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Dr. George Fraunfelter is the curator of geology here on the Carbondale campus of Southern Illinois University. Dr. Fraunfelter, what have you lost in this fire?
I lost over half my personal library, which is probably worth about $10,000 at least, and 3 manuscripts are just about completed.
And now, what will this do to the geology department?
Well, as far as the geology department here, it won't affect the museum too much because most of our materials are stored in another building.
Well, now, do you think that you will be able to recover any of this material either when they finally stop putting water in there? Do you think there's a possibility of you having saved something that you don't know about as yet?
Oh, yeah, there's always that possibility if they'll let us back in the building.
But right now, you're most concerned about those manuscripts that you lost.
That's right.
Mrs. Basil Hedrick is the wife of the assistant director of the museum. Mrs. Hedrick, any idea what you were able to save?
Let me catch my breath a moment. I know that they were able, from the museum, to get out all of the file cabinets. We were able to get out all of the materials that was connected with the gift shop and have put those presently in Shryock Auditorium, hoping that it doesn't go, and I don't think it will at this point. We were able to get out the student art exhibit, which has been on show now for the past month. And since they were able to let us back into the building about an hour ago, we have, as you see behind us, been getting books out and trying to salvage anything in the way of research papers, manuals, and manuscripts of the various personnel connected with the museum.
This has been a very hard blow for both you and your husband, hasn't
Yes, it has. They've been working very hard with the museum, trying to revamp and restructure the whole situation, and now this has come, and so this is a blow to us.
understand that the students have played a very important role out here this morning. Do you know much about that?
Yes, I know, I think, almost all about it because Mrs. Morris and I came over as soon as we heard the fire sirens this morning, and were there, I think, immediately after the firemen. And the thing was very clear in walking through the lower floor of the building that, fortunately, the museum exhibits had been vacated. They apparently were changing them, so there was no problem there. But there were very important things like personal files, personal in the sense of university and professional research work, and files about the museum expeditions, and all kinds of records that go back many, many years and represent the life work of many people. These records, I believe, were almost, if not totally, saved, and solely due to the fact that students pitched in sufficient numbers and with sufficient vigor and real, I think one would have to say bravely, to remove them. And they are now stored and have not been lost. They also were very helpful in removing records from offices to which they could get access and carrying those out, and even were walking down steps through the sort of torrent of water coming down from above and wading through water to get them to the outside. It was a very heartening thing indeed.
Is there any possible, at this point, rough estimation of what the losses might be, just a rough estimate?
I'll come to that in a moment. I think I better add another footnote on the students, because the students have really been a very important reinforcement of the fire protection people. The moving of these shoes hoses, and if you notice, numbers of them were completely manned by students who were handling them, and they worked as diligently as I've ever seen anybody throughout it. Even though it's been only a holding action, it was a very warming one, and did make it possible to recover more things. Now about your question on the dollar value, of course this is extraordinarily difficult to assess. I would just guess that something in the order of $250,000 to $350,000 in investment in the building itself would be fairly close, and that's really a guess, and I shouldn't really make one. As to what remains by way of records and equipment that has been lost, that will be in addition. The thing you can't put value on at all, of course, is the value of a building that has stood here as far as its foundation is concerned from the beginning and rebuilt on that old foundation until now. And to see a building that has been through 100 years of the school's history now be removed from it is going to be a wrenching experience for alumni and parents and friends of the university around the world, in fact, because of its sentimental value. And that you can't put a price on. Now, another price tag that one could put is not what money was spent on it, but what will it cost to replace it. We're talking about a building that was built 100 years, 90 years ago, approximately, after it burned, and replacing it now in the light of today's prices, which are many, many times greater than then. This whole campus on which we are standing, in its initial construction, cost less than $1 million, I'm told, and that gives you a rough idea. It will take millions of dollars to replace the space that is in this building, which of course will be an emergency priority kind of thing if we're to handle next fall the students, even in the numbers that are now here, because its class load was very major in terms of the number of students who was up here.
Captain Elmer Rodgers is the Assistant Fire Chief of the Carbondale Fire Department. Captain Rodgers, how is it that you're here on the campus of Southern Illinois University today, and what did you find?
Well, could I hold it?
No, that's all right. Just go ahead.
We got the call approximately 8 o'clock. I don't have the exact time right now, but when we got here, the fire was in the attic of the southeast corner of Old Main. We had more fire than we could handle at the time with the ladders, the equipment that we had. Immediately upon finding this out, we called Heron, Marion, Carterville, Mount Vernon, DuQuoin. We had other towns that volunteered immediately to come and help. We called for this Mount Vernon snorkel, although it's 60 miles away, to use in case we need it. And 15 minutes later, we had no doubt of what we needed this snorkel. Fire spread very rapidly through the attic, then to the 3rd floor. We have tried to put enough water on the 3rd floor to shed it off to where we could get in. This proved unsuccessful because of the danger of walls. There's too many firewalls inside that are falling. We stayed in as long as we could, and then we withdrew. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the students, all the volunteer help that have actually made our work easier and have done a wonderful job. They've been very marvelous. I just don't know how to thank them. We have definitely shown the need for more equipment for this type of fire.
Lieutenant Tom Ray and Fireman Bob Hall are both from Mount Vernon, Illinois. They are both firemen. Lieutenant Ray, what has been going on this morning? Well, what kind of unit do you have, I should ask, first of all?
I beg your pardon?
What kind of firefighting equipment did you bring in from Mount Vernon?
Well, we brought our snorkel unit, our 75-foot snorkel from Elmer.
Now, what have you been doing in terms of putting this fire out?
We've just been throwing an awful lot of water. We can get on it.
Was it necessary for you to physically go in the building at any time this morning?
No, sir.
I understand that the students have been doing quite a bit in helping.
Apparently they were a great deal of help because every time we looked around, we seen plenty of them, and they were pulling lines. And they helped us get hooked up, and they was a big help, I'd say.
As a fireman, I wonder if you could tell us what were your duties this morning here?
Well, I started out in the basket of the snorkel, and I was up there pretty well until the fire was pretty well knocked down, and pretty well stayed up in the basket during the whole operation.
What kind of mutual aid is this that I've heard you talk about this morning between the various cities in the area?
Well, it's just kind of an understanding between the towns of Southern Illinois. Or a fire, something like this, is just too big for a department to handle by themselves. And we have an agreement with the other towns where if they get more than they can handle, they call us. By the same token, if we have too much for us, well, we call them, and it works out real well for us.
How many alarms, five alarm, a 6 alarm, would you say that this fire was?
Well, I'm not too familiar with alarm systems because the smaller towns of Southern Illinois, they don't use a number alarm system, but I don't know how it would be in St. Louis, the big cities, they do. But the small towns, they don't. I don't know how many towns they've got here, but I would guess probably 8, 10, or a dozen.
Now, who's protecting your town while you're here?
Well, we call in extra men, and we leave most of our equipment there. We just bring the one unit, and if they should need it, why, they do the same thing. While we were down here, they'd call for help if they had to have it.
Well, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the long period covering several years when some
somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, we were trying to consider what was best to do about the future of Old Main as a result of the master plan for the campus. It had been under some repair activity in the past, but basically there was a great deal that had to be done or else take the building down. The windows were old, the frames were decaying, the floors were worn out, the whole situation, lighting and electrical supply and all the rest was very, very bad. And largely because there was such a great deal of feeling of affection for Old Main from all the people, not only who had attended here, but from the public generally, that we decided that it would be in the public interest to rebuild it. At that time, at the time this building was built, it cost, I believe, $100,000 back in the 80s to rebuild it after the first fire of the building. It cost very substantially more than that to bring it into the condition it was before the fire. We replaced all the windows, we blocked up the openings, there was re-roofed, the building was strengthened in those places where it needed to be, and it was modernized throughout so that it became a useful and practical kind of building. And we redesigned early thoughts on the campus design, which called for the campus loop road to go through where Old Main stood, and what's left is now standing. And we revised that just to save Old Main. It somehow has earned a great deal of sentiment from all who have been associated with it, and I would certainly consider myself one of those. It had a great deal of charm and of just history about it, and it's a sad thing indeed to lose it. It was not a modern building, and quite obviously its construction was wood throughout, save for the two firewalls that went crossways about at third points of the building.